Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our live coverage of the latest mission from Cape Canaveral Spaceport Station. I'm Will Robinson Smith. I'll be performing our commentary for the duration of this coverage. We are broadcasting, as we always do, from the Spaceflight Now News Bureau here at NASA's Kennedy Space Center. Got quite a busy afternoon into the evening on deck. As we mentioned in our tweet, SpaceX is balancing both the upcoming launch of the rocket you see here at the center of your screen. This is, of course, Falcon 9, standing in the center of Space Launch Complex 40. Getting ready to send up another 23 Starlink satellites into low Earth orbit. Simultaneously, another contingency within SpaceX is working with NASA in order to bring a very important spacecraft back from low Earth orbit. That, of course, is the Crew Dragon Endeavour, set to undock from the International Space Station, coming up here on the other side of the hour. 3 astronauts, 1 cosmonaut on board the Dragon supporting the Crew 8 mission. Those are Commander Matthew Dominic, pilot Michael Barrett, mission specialist Jeanette Epps, all 3 NASA astronauts, alongside Roscosmos cosmonaut Alexander Gurbankin, who's serving as well as a mission specialist. Undock from the ISS is set for 5:05 p.m. Eastern, 21:05 UTC, and we'll be toggling back and forth between views from the undocking process as well as the preparation for the Starlink 6-61 mission launch. So we appreciate you being with us on a very busy afternoon. We're supported, of course, by our Spaceflight Now editor, Stephen Young, who's running the technical operations of the broadcast this afternoon. Our photographers, Adam Bernstein and Michael Kane, out getting ready to shoot the rocket. Adam also preparing to track the vehicle once it lifts off. If you're not already following the fellows, you can find them on X. Adam is at ABurnNYC, Michael Kane at MD Kane Jr. Those, again, both on X, formerly Twitter. While you're over there, be sure to follow Spaceflight Now, simply at Spaceflight Now. If you're not on X yourself, you can also find us on Facebook as well as Threads. Currently T-minus 56 minutes, 52 seconds and counting. We'll also be joined in tracking assistance by our friends Chuck and Jen Briggs with C&J Images, as well as Pete Karstens with Max Q Productions. As we get things going, I want to thank the more than 1,100 of you that are joining with us live. If you haven't already, we'd certainly appreciate it if you could give us a like on this live stream. It allows the YouTube algorithm to do its thing and allow more folks to find this live coverage as we continue on through the count. Want to thank our moderators in the live chat as well for helping us out this afternoon, cruising on into the evening. See you, Astro Joe and Callistia Lee. And we'll keep an eye out for our other mods, should they happen to cruise on in here. If they do, be sure to give them a big old hello. You can help them out in the live chat by A, not using all caps, and B, being respectful of each other, and C, refraining from delving into overt politics. We appreciate your cooperation and consideration for these guidelines. We hope you enjoy your time here for our live coverage. For those who may have been with us for our last launch attempt coverage here, recall the weather at the the Falcon booster recovery zone down near the Bahamas was unfavorable, which is the reason that they pushed off this attempt. However, conditions have cleared up, and so SpaceX is pursuing this launch attempt today. Taking a look at the forecast from the 45th Weather Squadron about today's launch opportunity. Meteorologists forecast just a 15% chance of unfavorable weather. So an improvement from yesterday. We're standing by. We should be getting a go, no go poll for Dragon undock from the International Space Station. Let's go ahead and listen into that for just a moment here. As we await that poll, do want to note that if for whatever reason SpaceX is unable to launch today, the 24-hour backup opportunity is greater than 95% favorable for liftoff from a weather standpoint, but conditions looking pretty good today. Currently T-minus 52 minutes, 14 seconds and counting. For the Falcon 9 rocket launch, of course, you see that rocket there live on the right-hand side of your screen. Coming up at the T-minus 38-minute mark is when the SpaceX launch director for this mission will make the call on the start of propellant load. While we won't hear that call out, it is a poll done electronically, and if SpaceX feels like they're in a good posture to do so, they can go ahead and move forward with that poll a little bit early.
Dragon SpaceX on the Big Loop. Final reconfigurations for undock are complete and nominal. Houston and Hawthorne teams have pulled go for undock at 2100 and separation at 2105. At this time, can you confirm crew readiness for undock?
SpaceX Dragon, we are go for undock advisories closed.
Okay, copy all.
And a good update from Mission Control Center in Houston that they have pulled go for Dragon undock. So they are going to proceed with that. They'll start by releasing the hooks that are holding the Dragon in place on the Zenith port or the space-facing port of the Harmony module. As the Dragon departs the space station, there's a series of 4 burns that will help the Dragon move away from the International Space Station. These are the departure burns. This is all to set up a splashdown off the coast of Florida in the pre-dawn morning hours of Friday, October 25th. Dragon splashdown anticipated around 3:29 a.m. Eastern. It is 07:29 UTC. Currently T-minus 49 minutes, 26 seconds and counting. Be remiss if I didn't take a beat to thank our wonderful channel member community for helping to support what we do here at Spaceflight now. So thanks to folks like Sulfur for Lunch, Bubba Ray, Ralph Kilcup, Jean-Luc, assuming that's a Star Trek reference, the Rocket Girl, Josh King, and many others. I'm Lita. Good to see you this afternoon. Tobe Wobe. Hello, hello. Channel membership comes with a number of perks, including discounts at our online shop, that is shop.spaceflightnow.com. Access to member-only videos, of course, the ability to watch all of our live launch liftoff moments here at the Cape in 4K. Last but not least, if you have a comment or question about this mission or other happenings in space, or just want to offer some kind words of support, you can use the YouTube Super Chat feature. Not only will you be supporting what we do here at Spaceflight Now, but you'll also be giving us some interesting things to talk about as we cruise on in towards a liftoff. And that is also always appreciated. So thanks to Mel Roberts Harold for a $5 super chat. Good to see you this afternoon, Mel. Says once again, thank goodness for the alerts. Checking in from Chicagoland. Now T minus 47 minutes, 58 seconds, and counting. We're about 10 minutes, a little less than 10 minutes away now from the nominal point in which the SpaceX launch director will make the call on the start of prop load. Let's go ahead and step through the countdown timeline here for these nominal milestones. Following the go-ahead being given for prop load, fueling will begin at the T-minus 35-minute mark. The loading of RP-1 or rocket-grade kerosene on board the Falcon 9's first and second stages. At the same time, liquid oxygen will also be loaded on board the Falcon 9's first stage. About T-minus 30 minutes, they start loading cryogenic helium on board the Falcon 9's first stage, the pressure vessels. Helium is used to pressurize the main propellant tanks during flight. Same will happen on the second stage about 4 or so minutes after that. About T-minus 23 minutes, second stage RP-1 loading concludes. And at T-minus 20 minutes and 50 seconds, the chill down of the feed lines on the strong back gets underway. This is a process. It's a process that we will see evidenced by the so-called big vent. Just listening into the loops there regarding Dragon undocking, the command has been issued for the undocking sequence to begin. Now, top of the hour here on the East Coast, 5 o'clock. The 12 hard capture hooks will be released over 2 phases. Dragon is anticipating an undock around 5:05 p.m. Eastern, 21:05 UTC. So we're just about 5 minutes, maybe a hair under, from the undocking of Dragon from the International Space Station. We'll go ahead and clock that as it happens. Coming back to the timing here on the Falcon 9 rocket. Again, we see that big vent coming up at T-minus 20 minutes and 20 seconds. That's a good visual indication that fueling is moving along on time and on track. Sets up second stage LOX load at T-minus 16 minutes. Chill down of the 9 Merlin engines at the base of the Falcon 9 rocket begins at T-minus 7 minutes. It involves flowing a small amount of liquid oxygen through the plumbing and turbo pumps, and it helps protect the engines from the risk of thermal shock and damage during the startup sequence. 6 minutes out, the first stage kerosene tank is full, and at T-minus 4.5 minutes, the strong back retract sequence begins. Starts with the clamp arms underneath the payload fairings opening up, and then the transport erector, the strong back, will recline about 1.5 degrees away from the Falcon 9 rocket. Stays in that position until liftoff, at which point it pulls back in a much more rapid fashion to clear the way for the vertical climb of the Falcon 9. First stage LOX load wraps up at T-minus 3 minutes. Same on the second stage, about a minute or so later. We'll hear the call out that the Falcon 9 is in startup about a minute out. At that point, control of the countdown is being handed over from the ground sequencer to the Falcon 9's onboard flight computers, and the propellant tanks are brought up to flight pressure. SpaceX launch director will give their go for launch at 45 seconds out. The engine ignition command is issued at T minus 3 seconds, and if all 9 engines are healthy and ignite, the flight computer will give the command for the hold down clamps to release the Falcon 9 for T0 at 5:47 p.m. Eastern. We do have the call that the first set of hooks that are holding the Dragon spacecraft have been released. Local time here, 5:03 p.m. Eastern. Let's go ahead and bring back our views from Mission Control Center, Houston, as we're anticipating the release of the Dragon spacecraft in the next couple of minutes here. Now, T minus 41 minutes, 47 seconds, and counting on the Falcon 9 rocket launch. We should be coming into just heard the call that all hooks are open on the Dragon spacecraft. With all 12 hooks now open, the Dragon spacecraft has now officially been separated from the space station, time 5:05 p.m. Eastern. Let's go ahead and listen in for a moment.
Endeavour departing. Fair winds and falling seas, and Miyaki Pisaki, my friends.
Come on, Dragon. The circle will never be the same without you.
Good words from our crew members departing space station right now.
Jason Jack. It's been an absolute pleasure to serve aboard the space station and stand to watch. It's in great hands. Godspeed.
Tojo, you'll never guess what I found.
Thank you.
Roger.
If you take a look just to the left of the Canadarm, you can see the Dragon spacecraft now floating free from the ISS. Now T-minus 38 minutes, 22 seconds and counting on the Falcon 9 mission here at the Cape. Getting some good views of Crew Dragon Endeavour now flying free after being released from the Zenith port of the Harmony module of the International Space Station. This will begin the little more than a day's journey home, with the spacecraft set to splash down off the coast of Florida. That's coming up on Friday morning. Splashdown set for approximately 3:29 a.m. Eastern, 07:29 UTC. That'll be followed by a post-splashdown media teleconference with Richard Jones, who's the deputy manager of NASA's Commercial Crew Program, Bill Spetch, the operations and integration manager of the ISS program for NASA, and yet to be determined representative from SpaceX. Now T-minus 36 minutes, 39 seconds and counting. Assuming all continues to remain on track with the Falcon 9 flight, we're about a minute and a half away from the start of fueling. Did you hear the call that the departure burn 0 was nominal? Should be coming up on departure burn 1. And did get confirmation of a good departure burn 1.
I've got another reminder here that the big loop will be deactivated following Dragon.
The crew has been given permission to doff or take off their suits at this point. Taking a look at a split screen on the left-hand side is Mission Control Center in Hawthorne, California. On the right in the big box is Mission Control Center in Houston. We are tracking the beginning of prop load here. Should have started about 20 or so seconds ago. Again, propellant load on the Falcon 9 rocket begins with RP-1 being loaded on board the Falcon 9's first and second stages, and at the same time, liquid oxygen begins flowing on board the Falcon 9's first stage. Taking a closer look at the Falcon 9 rocket, here's what we're looking for as we hopefully get confirmation from SpaceX that prop load is underway. If you see just above the tree line there, you could see a slightly lighter colored horizontal band, the base of the Falcon 9 rocket. I know the camera's bouncing around a little bit. It's quite windy out there today. A little bit less windy than yesterday, but still blustery is the order of the day. But right about that point is where we should start seeing a little bit of vapor form along with the frost ring as the super cold densified liquid oxygen starts flowing on board the Falcon 9, or excuse me, the Falcon 9 rocket. Sorry. I was looking at the split screen here with the Dragon spacecraft that is cruising by this part of the International Space Station. As mentioned, there are two simultaneous SpaceX missions underway, one on the ground about to go up and one up in low Earth orbit, making its way on down. Did hear confirmation that Crew Dragon Endeavour has left the keep out sphere. Let's listen in for a second, Stephen, if we can't bring up their audio.
You're continuing to see a view of Dragon following its undocking from the International Space Station at 2:05 p.m. while flying over the Pacific Ocean, approaching the western tip of South America. Now, we did just get word that Dragon has exited the keep-out sphere. You might have even seen some of those thruster firings on your screen as we got that call out. The keep-out sphere is an imaginary sphere or boundary that's 200 meters in radius around the space station. It's one of several safety zones set up to govern visiting vehicles either arriving or departing the International Space Station, and you can continue to see these great views of Dragon as it departs the space station, slowly backing away. Now, before moving into the keep-out sphere, all of the spacecraft have to be configured where they would not cross the imaginary boundary for at least 4 orbits, even if for some reason the spacecraft lost all maneuvering. But again, we don't expect that to occur today.
Next milestone for the Dragon spacecraft is to exit what's called the approach ellipsoid, continuing to make good progress on its departure from the International Space Station. Its next noted departure burn is coming up at about 5:58 p.m. Eastern, 21:58 UTC. We also have word from SpaceX that count load is underway on today's Falcon 9 rocket launch. So do have confirmation that fueling has begun, which means SpaceX is committing to its target liftoff time, which is coming up at 5:47 p.m. Yes, 5:47 p.m. Eastern. Kind of a nifty view here of the Dragon Endeavour reflecting the sun and creating a kind of a nifty effect here in the camera, which you can see through the glass. One of the lens flare is the word I was looking for. I don't know why that couldn't come to mind, but yeah, nifty lens flare that you see here. One of the solar panels, solar rays on the International Space Station extending from the top right-hand corner of the box. Now T-minus 30 minutes, 11 seconds and counting on the Falcon 9 rocket launch. At this point, SpaceX is just about to start flowing cryogenic helium onto the pressure vessels on the Falcon 9's first stage. Helium is used to pressurize the main propellant tanks during flight. Dragon spacecraft is approaching the point at which it will exit the approach ellipsoid, coming up here in the next little bit. T minus 29 minutes, 14 seconds and counting on the Falcon 9 flight from Pad 40 at Cape Canaveral Space Force Station. Today's launch set to be the 384th Falcon 9 launch to date. The 211th SpaceX launch from Pad 40, the 266th overall launch from Slick 40 as well. 23 Starlink satellites are on board this Falcon 9 rocket, heading up to the 6th shell of the Starlink constellation in low Earth orbit. We'll show you the trajectory here in just a moment. Do want to keep up these live views, though, the Crew Dragon Endeavour, while we still have good eyes on it. Broadly speaking, though, the Falcon 9 will be flying in a southeasterly trajectory once it leaves the pad. Well, it looks like they are in a handover right now between communication satellites. Now's a good time to go ahead and bring up the trajectory here. Again, as I was just alluding to, taking a satellite view look at Slick 40, the Falcon 9 rocket's going to be flying in a southeasterly trajectory once it does leave the pad. It's been a minute since we've had a rocket fly this path. So hopefully it will give some good views for our neighbors to the south. Once the Falcon 9 first stage booster separates from the second stage, it will head on down for a rendezvous with the drone ship called a shortfall of gravitas. If successful, this will mark the 82nd booster landing for shortfall of gravitas and the 357th Falcon booster landing in total. SpaceX will endeavor to recover the payload fairings. They float down to the waters of the Atlantic Ocean under the support of parachutes. And then they will be scooped up by one of the recovery vessels like you see here on your screen. SpaceX has been busy this week. Not only were they getting ready for the undocking of the Crew Dragon, which, of course, we all just saw in the last few minutes. Not only were they getting ready for the Starlink 6-61 mission, but they also rolled the next Super Heavy booster out to the orbital launch mount to do some testing ahead of the Flight 6 mission. Of course, SpaceX made quite a bit of history by catching the Super Heavy booster during Flight 5. We'll likely look to advance beyond that with some yet-to-be-named milestones for the Crew 6 mission. Now T minus 25 minutes, 8 seconds and counting. Going back just a minute to the payload fairing recovery, while this is a Starlink mission, which means that SpaceX will not be sharing views of the deployment of the Starlink satellites. They did share some video of a recent mission in which Starlinks were deployed, and you can see the payload fairing separation and the views from what SpaceX describes as both the active and the passive payload fairings. Video also cuts off before we see the parachutes deploy. That would be cool to see that sequence. Maybe they'll release video of that sometime in the future. There's a view from the other half of this payload fairing duo here. In a second, you'll see a side-by-side or one view on top of the other. Again, SpaceX will endeavor to recover the payload fairings being used on this particular mission once it's complete. SpaceX is working to certify both its Falcon boosters as well as the payload fairings for up to 40 flights apiece. While SpaceX doesn't often make mention of the number of reuses that the payload fairings have completed, so far, historically, the most flown boosters were B-1061 and 1062, which managed 23 missions apiece before they ended their service for SpaceX. Of the boosters that are currently still flying, the flight leader status belongs with B-1067, which has 22 missions to its name, most recently launched back on September 17th. The first stage booster flying on today's mission, B-1073 in the SpaceX fleet, will be launching for an 18th time. And we'll talk a little bit more about its flight history in just a little bit. Taking a look at the live chat, want to thank the now more than 5,800 of you who are joining with us live. If you haven't already, be sure to hit that like button for us. Allows the YouTube algorithm to do its thing and bring this coverage to more folks as we step on through the final, roughly 22 and a half minutes of the count. And that's certainly very appreciated. Taking a look at our live chat here. Also want to thank Brian Clark for a £5 super chat. And says, from Brian and Linda in, I believe it's Coventry, UK. Stephen will tell me if I'm right or wrong on that in my ear. Coventry. Yeah, close enough. And thanks to Tobe Wobe for gifting 5 Spaceflight Now memberships as well. Appreciate that. And to our newest channel members, welcome aboard. Glad to have you with us. Be sure to thank Tobe in the live chat if you haven't already. Hope you enjoy your time as a channel member and continue to stick around with us. Now currently T-minus 21 minutes, 18 seconds and counting. A little less than a minute away from when we should start seeing the so-called big vent. Good visual sign that fueling is moving along on time and on track today. Note on the Crew Dragon Endeavour, the vehicle has exited the approach ellipsoid, another milestone ticked off as it continues its departure from the International Space Station, with undocking happening at 5:05 p.m. Eastern, 21:05 UTC. And you see the big vent now getting underway here at pad 40. Good sign. Fueling is on track. Now currently T minus 17 minutes, 27 seconds and counting. The big vent has a little less than a minute left before it wraps up and SpaceX moves into second stage liquid oxygen load. So far, fueling is moving along quite smoothly today. No hiccups of which to speak. As you just saw with the live shot, besides being a bit breezy today, conditions are fairly favorable for a launch. About 85% chance of favorable weather for liftoff was the forecast set by the fine folks at the 45th Weather Squadron. Those launch weather officers obviously always keeping quite vigilant when it comes to any launch operation. You see the big vent has concluded and second stage lock load is getting ready to begin in less than 30 seconds. T minus 14 minutes, 26 seconds and counting. At this point, second stage liquid oxygen should be flowing on board the Falcon 9's second stage. Seeing a bit more trail off venting than we do see sometimes following the conclusion primarily of the so-called big vent. Not to say that that's necessarily an issue, just noting it for the record. Now T minus 12 minutes, 47 seconds and counting. This booster, tail number 1063, is getting ready to fly for an 18th time. So while we have time, let's go ahead and step through its flight record. first flew back on May 14th of 2022. That was the Starlink 4-15 mission, adding 53 version 1.5 Starlink satellites to low Earth orbit. Next up was a C-band communications satellite for SES-22, that lifted off on June 29th. That was followed up by a pair of Starlink missions on August 10th. That was Starlink 4-26 and September 24th. That was Starlink 4-35. Those are followed by this booster's first lunar supporting mission, the launch of the Hakuto R mission lander, lifting off on December 11th. Followed up on February 7th of 2023, B-1073 launched the Amazonas Nexus satellite. This was a Spanish communications satellite for the company Hispasat, covers the Americas, Europe, and North Africa. Followed up by a mission to the International Space Station, the 27th commercial cargo flight to the ISS for SpaceX, CRS-27 lifting off on March 15th. It was followed by a series of Starlink missions. You had Starlink 6-2 on April 19th, 5-11 on June 12th, 6-12 on September 4th of 2023, 6-27 on November 8th, 6-37 on January 15th, coming into this year, and 6-41 on March 1st. It was followed up by the first mid-inclination orbit rideshare mission called Bandwagon 1, which launched on April 7th. Brought us back to Starlinks. We had Starlink 6-58 on May 13th, 8-9 on July 3rd, and most recently Starlink 10-7 on August 12th. Setting up for Starlink 6-61, getting ready to lift off today, assuming all continues to move well with this rocket. Speaking of the rocket, as we're currently T-minus 10 minutes, 16 seconds and counting, let's go ahead and talk about SpaceX's workhorse vehicle. Getting ready to launch in just a hair over 10 minutes. Stands 70 meters or 229 feet tall with a diameter of 3.66 meters or 12 feet. Majority of that is made up by the Falcon 9's first stage. Just talked about that booster, 1073, flying for an 18th time today. The base of the first stage are 9 Merlin engines, which burn rocket-grade kerosene and liquid oxygen, producing 1.7 million pounds of thrust. Around the engine compartment are black carbon fiber landing legs. They'll be used to land this booster on the drone ship, a shortfall Gravitas. Above the first stage is the inner stage. This is a composite structure consisting of an aluminum honeycomb core, which is surrounded by carbon fiber. In that image on the right-hand side of your screen, you can see the deployable hypersonic grid fins. These are titanium winglets that provide stability and steering for the Falcon 9 as it comes back through the atmosphere tail first, like a big old dart heading towards the drone ship. At the top of the inner stage are 3 mechanical latches that attach to the second stage. And at first stage main engine cutoff, high-pressure helium is used to release those latches, and 4 pneumatic pushers ensure a clean separation. Also, the second stage engine nozzle is housed safely within the inner stage adapter until stage separation. Speaking of that second stage, the upper stage of the Falcon 9, powered by a single modified Merlin engine called a Merlin vacuum engine, or an MVAC engine. It's equipped with a nozzle that is optimized for burns in the vacuum of space, hence the name. If SpaceX doesn't need the full power of the upper stage, it can use a shorter nozzle, which is cheaper to manufacture. The upper stage produces more than 220,500 pounds of thrust. And on a Starlink mission, they will use the long nozzle. MVAC engine burns the same propellant mix, that being RP1 and LOX, same as the first stage. Following spacecraft separation or deployment of the Starlink satellites, there will be a third burn, as a deorbit burn, helping to drive the upper stage back into the atmosphere, where it will burn up, helping to eliminate the risk of creating any unnecessary space debris on this mission. Finally, at the top of the rocket are the payload fairings, encapsulating the 23 Starlink satellites. Fairings are made up of a carbon composite material. They stand 13.1 meters or 43 feet tall and are 5.2 meters or 17.1 feet in diameter. Two halves of the payload fairing will be recovered a little further downrange from where the first stage lands on the drone ship, a short fall of gravitas. They will gently splash down under parachutes, like we showed you a little bit earlier in the broadcast. And SpaceX will use one of its recovery vessels to scoop them up, bring them back into Port Canaveral, offload them, drive them on over to Cape Canaveral, where they will be refurbished and turned around for future flights. We're now T-minus 7 minutes, 3 seconds and counting. We are coming up on the engine shutdown sequence. That process, once again, for those who may not have been with us earlier in the broadcast, involves flowing a small amount of liquid oxygen through the plumbing and the turbo pumps and helps protect them from the risk of thermal shock and damage during the startup sequence. As we continue on into these final handful of minutes of the count, want to thank the now more than 15,000 of you who are joining with us live. If you haven't already, we would certainly appreciate it if you could hit that like button for us. It allows the YouTube algorithm to recognize that you're here and active and bring this live coverage to a few more folks. We'd certainly appreciate that. I also want to thank Space Pony, one of our wonderful channel members, for gifting 5 Spaceflight Now memberships. Really appreciate that, Space Pony. And to Debster for joining us, the channel membership at the pad leader level. Welcome aboard to Debster and to our newest 5 channel members as well. In addition, we're glad to have you all with us. Channel membership comes with a number of perks, including discounts at our online shop that is shop.spaceflightnow.com. Access to member-only videos here on YouTube, and of course, the ability to watch all of our launch liftoff moments here at the Cape in 4K. Also want to quickly thank Space Pony for a $2 super chat. It's asking, how will I survive next year's launch numbers with a good amount of caffeine and hopefully getting sleep as much as I can. But in all seriousness, we will survive because we have a good and steady team here at Spaceflight Now that are all behind the mic, backing us up here. So not a solo venture, thank goodness. Now T-minus 4 minutes, 30 seconds and counting. Getting some views of the pad and mission audio from SpaceX. Should be hearing the call for Strongback retract.
Strongback lower has started.
Right on cue. Nice view of the crew access tower on the Falcon 9 against the backdrop of a setting sun. Peering through that crew access tower. Just a quick bit of housekeeping here. You'll notice our countdown clock in the upper right-hand corner of the screen, a little bit ahead of what you see there from SpaceX as the clamp arms are opening up. That's because our clock is in real time. What's coming through from the SpaceX feed is coming in on a slight delay. So for the first part of the coverage post liftoff, we'll be making our calls out based off of real time as those align with our actual tracking cameras here on the ground. Now T-minus 2 minutes, 47 seconds. The Falcon 9 first stage.
Stage 1 LOX load is complete.
Load is, as I was just about to say, is just wrapping up. Next call we'll be hearing is for second stage LOX load. It's coming up in now less than 30 seconds. Now less than 2 minutes. Should hear the call for second stage LOX load being complete momentarily.
Stage 2 LOX load is complete.
And with that call, the Falcon 9 is now fully loaded with 1 million pounds of propellant. What you're seeing here on your screen are the ground gas closeouts.
Gas launch closeouts has started.
Good call from SpaceX. Now just over a minute away to liftoff. We'll come back to comments from the live chat on the other side of liftoff, but with just about a minute to go, we're going to keep our focus here on the Falcon 9 rocket. T-minus 1 minute.
Falcon 9 is in startup.
With that call, control the ground. The countdown is handed over now to the ground sequencer, from the ground sequencer to the Falcon 9's onboard flight computers. The propellant tanks being brought up to flight pressure. And with that go for launch, we are now just about 30 seconds away from the liftoff of this Falcon 9 rocket. "20 seconds. 15 seconds. And here we go. In 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Engine ignition. And liftoff of the Falcon 9 rocket on the Starlink 6-61 mission. The Falcon 9 has cleared the tower.
Power and telemetry nominal.
Now a little more than a minute into flight. Some great tracking views from our team here around Florida's Space Coast.
Max Q.
A call for Max Q, the Falcon 9 passing through the point of greatest aerodynamic pressure on the vehicle. Coming upon a few events in fairly rapid succession. See first stage main engine cutoff at T plus 2 minutes 25 seconds. That'll be followed by stage separation a few seconds after that. The Merlin vacuum engine on the second stage will ignite at T plus 2 minutes 36 seconds. The payload fairings will be deployed at about the 3-minute mark. That call you just heard from SpaceX, they are thermally conditioning the Merlin vacuum engine on the second stage in preparation for its ignition coming up here in less than 30 seconds. Coming up on MECO. Do you see Miko? A great view of stage separation from
Main engine
front P.
cutoff.
Carson's. And there you see ignition.
Stage separation confirmed.
And back
Good
ignition.
views from the SpaceX onboard cameras and some excellent tracking today. Now going through a little bit of cloud from that camera vantage point. Fortunately, we've got other members of our team spread out around Florida Space Coast. Good view of the payload fairing deployment.
Fairing separation confirmed.
See that from the onboard cameras there. The Starlink satellites on this mission now exposed to the vacuum of space for the first time on this flight. Some good views from Chuck and Jen Briggs, seeing both the upper stage and the Falcon booster, as well as the payload fairings reflecting the sun. Really nice views here today. Now a little more than 4 minutes into flight. We're less than 2 minutes away from the next milestone, which is the first stage entry burn. That burn's set to last about 24 seconds in total. Still getting some good views of the Falcon 9 upper stage. A little hard to track with the wind today, but this view coming from Pete Carson's with Max Q Productions. At the time of day as well, the onboard cameras from the Falcon 9 first and second stages are really quite something. Now coming up on 5 minutes into flight. Less than a minute is when the entry burn is set to begin. We may or may not be able to see it from the ground with our tracking cameras. If we do, we'll of course bring those views to you. T plus 6 minutes and counting. Entry burn should be underway in real time.
Stage 1 FTS is saved.
Stage 1 entry burn startup.
Entry burn may just be in the wrong position in the sky as compared to our tracking cameras to be able to catch it. That burn will have wrapped up by now. In real time, that is, you're seeing it from the SpaceX feed coming in on a slight delay.
Stage 1 entry burn shutdown.
Good call on the conclusion of the entry burn. That sets up the Falcon 9 first stage booster to start its landing burn coming up at about T plus 7 minutes, 44 seconds. And a first stage landing on the drone ship, a short fall of gravitas, about 8 minutes and 13 seconds post liftoff. Less than 30 seconds away from the landing burn beginning. Those puffs that you've been seeing in between the hypersonic grid fins on the Falcon first stage booster are the cold gas thrusters. Those help to adjust the attitude or the position of the Falcon 9 first stage booster.
Stage 2 FTS is saved.
As it makes its way towards the drone ship. Flight termination system for the FTS has been saved, as you just heard. No longer needed at this stage in flight. And the Falcon 9 first stage traveling below the speed of sound.
Stage 1 landing burn.
That landing burn underway. We should get some views of the drone ship coming up momentarily.
Stage 1 landing leg deploy.
And for an 18th time, booster 1073 is safely down on the drone ship.
And back shutdown.
And with that, we are now T plus 9 minutes, 14 seconds, and counting into this mission. Coming up next will be the reignition of the Merlin vacuum engine at T plus 54 minutes and 5 seconds. There'll be a brief 1-second burn to circularize the orbit. And the Starlink satellites will be deployed at T plus 1 hour, 5 minutes, and 13 seconds. With a good liftoff and landing of that first stage booster, we're going to go ahead and turn momentarily to our mission stats as they currently stand, but do want to thank a few folks in the live chat for your support this afternoon. Cruised on into the evening. Our thanks to Sulfur for Lunch for a 100 SEK super chat. Really appreciate that, Sulfur. It says Spaceflight now rocks. It's very kind of you. Ryan Snyder with a $5 super chat. Thank you, Ryan. Saying thank you, Spaceflight Now team. Appreciate your support of what we do here. Let's see, with the $2 super chat. Saying from Bob the Bugman. Appreciate you for that. And also for joining us with channel membership at the Pad Leader level. Patty Chichil, one of our pre-existing channel members with a $5 super chat. Thank you, Patty. Good to see you tonight. It says, watching in my car. Thank you, Spaceflight Now. And the mods, always great job. And last but certainly not least, big thank you to another one of our wonderful channel members, Beverly Knuckles, for gifting 10 Spaceflight Now memberships. Thank you so much, Beverly. And to our newest 10 channel members, welcome aboard. Glad to have you with us. And be sure to thank Beverly in the live chat if you haven't already. And thanks as well to Leonardo Dominguez for a $2 super chat. Thanks for your support tonight, Leonardo. Turning now to our mission stats as they currently stand. This particular launch marked the 18th flight of the Falcon 9 booster, tail number 1073 in the SpaceX fleet. This was the 384th Falcon 9 launch to date, the 99th Falcon 9 launch of 2024. This was the 329th Falcon booster reflight, or the launch of a booster that has flown at least once. This was SpaceX's 104th launch of the year, including 2 Falcon Heavy missions and 3 Starship flights. This was the 121st SpaceX orbital launch within the last 365 days, the 211th from Pad 40 for SpaceX, and the 266th overall orbital launch from this pad as well. Currently 101 total Falcon launches on the year. A little typo at the top of that should be October 23rd. Of course, we're couple delays with this mission. Moving on to some recovery stats. This was the 82nd landing on a drone ship of Shortfall of Gravitas. That marked the 280th SpaceX drone ship landing and the 357th overall booster landing for SpaceX. Finally, with some industry stats, this marked the 72nd orbital launch from the Sunshine State. Pause to note here, this ties the total number of launches completed from Florida in all of 2023. So one more and we break the record. And of course, being that it's only late October, we will more than just beat it by the time year's out. Still plenty of time for a number of missions to go up from here on Florida's Space Coast. This mission marked the 108th orbital launch from U.S. soil, the 118th from a U.S. rocket company this year, and the 194th orbital launch from around the world. With 6 orbital launch failures so far this year, here's where the pie chart currently stands. U.S. holding 61% of that pie, China with 51 launches on the year now. They had one this morning. They hold 26% of the pie. Russia, with its 11 launches, has 6%. Go to Japan, who's launched 5 times. Iran and India, 3 apiece. European Space Agency with 2. And North Korea with 1 orbital launch attempt and failure. Now 14 plus minutes into this mission. We're going to go ahead and wrap things up tonight, but if you haven't had your fill of launch activity for the week, don't have to wait too much longer. We do have on tap another Falcon 9 rocket, which will be their 100th of the year, assuming that remains on track and on schedule. That is NROL 167, launching from Vandenberg Space Force Base. That is coming up tomorrow at 1713 UTC. This is another batch of their so-called proliferated architecture, what are believed to be the Starshield satellites manufactured by SpaceX partnership with Northrop Grumman. And then bringing things back here to Florida Space Coast, we're looking for a weekend launch of the Starlink 10-8 mission. Also looking to lift off from this particular pad, Slick 40. And with that, we're going to go ahead and close things out. One last peek at the live chat here. I want to thank Marla Plunk, one of our wonderful channel members, for a $10 super chat. Thank you, Marla, for supporting us. Who says, always tune in to Spaceflight now for launches. Couldn't have said it better myself. Also want to welcome the lone solipsist for joining us, the channel membership at the pad leader level. Welcome in, Lone. Glad to have you with us. If you'd like to continue keeping your eyes on Pad 40 for just a hair longer after we wrap up this broadcast, you can check it out over on Launchpad Live. But you'll always be able to see pad views of 39A and what's going on down at Starbase over on Launchpad Live 24/7. Those Starbase views brought to you courtesy of our friends at Lab Padre. I want to thank our friends Chuck and Jen Briggs with C&J Images, Pete Carsons with Max Q Productions for helping us track the Falcon 9 rocket tonight. Also want to thank our photographers Adam Bernstein, Michael Kane for getting some great snaps as well. You can check those out. We'll have them posted on our X account, simply at Spaceflight Now. You can also follow their work. Michael is at MD Kane Jr., Adam at Aburn NYC. Thanks as always to our Spaceflight Now editor, Stephen Young, for running the technical operations of the broadcast. But most importantly, thanks to you for wherever you happen to be watching from. If you've made it all the way to the end of the broadcast, congratulations. Thanks for hanging in there with us. If you haven't already, be sure to subscribe to Spaceflight Now on your way out the digital door. Give this video a like so for folks that weren't able to join with us live, they can find this as a live launch replay at their convenience or your convenience if you want to come back and watch it again at your leisure. For all of us here at Spaceflight Now, I'm Will Robinson Smith. Remember, be good to yourselves, be good to others, and we will see you next time, folks. And until then, bye-bye.